In the dark emptiness of space, a lonely ship drifted, its hull battered and its systems barely functioning. The stars twinkled like distant memories, offering no comfort to the man aboard. Jace Carter, a former military engineer, sat at the control console, staring at the flickering lights that indicated his ship's failing systems. His hands moved instinctively, checking the monitors, rerouting power, doing everything he could to keep the ship alive. But deep inside, he knew that nothing could save it for long. Jace had spent the last few years drifting from place to place, avoiding the past that had destroyed him. He had once been part of a thriving military unit, helping to engineer some of the most advanced starships ever built. But after the war, after the betrayal, and the loss of his comrades, Jace couldn't bear the thought of staying on Earth. The war had taken too much from him. It had broken him, and he couldn't find a way to piece himself back together. Now he was just a scavenger, trying to survive in the cold, vast reaches of space. His ship was nothing special, an old freighter he had repaired countless times. It had become a symbol of his own life, patched up, worn out, and on the verge of falling apart. As he navigated through the silent expanse, Jace couldn't help but wonder if there was any point to it all. But then, just as he thought things couldn't get worse, something strange happened. His communication system beeped to life. The signal was faint, crackling with static, but there was no mistaking it. It was a distress call. Jace leaned forward in his seat, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected to find anything out here, certainly not another ship. He quickly adjusted the frequency, hoping to get a clearer reading. The words that came through were unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakable. Desperation. For a moment, he considered ignoring the signal. He wasn't in the mood to get involved with anyone else's problems, but the thought of another soul out here in the void, someone who might be just as broken as he was, drew him in. Maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to do something, anything, that might give his life meaning again. With a quiet sigh, Jace adjusted the controls and set a course toward the signal. As the ship drifted through the vastness of space, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary distress call. There was something familiar about it. But what? Hours passed, and the signal grew stronger. Soon, the source was visible on his scanners. An alien ship. The design was sleek, almost elegant, unlike anything Jace had ever seen before. Its hull shimmered in the dim light of the stars, but it was clear that the ship was in trouble. Massive gashes marred its exterior, and sections of the hull were barely hanging together. Jace's heart raced as he drew closer. What kind of ship was this? It was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. His mind raced with possibilities, and despite his better judgment, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. There had to be someone aboard, someone alive. He activated the docking procedures and guided his ship into the larger alien vessel's docking bay. The area was eerily quiet, and the atmosphere was thick with the scent of burnt metal and something unfamiliar. As Jace stepped out of his ship, he felt a strange chill creep down his spine. The alien ship was cold, lifeless, and yet there was something almost hauntingly beautiful about it. The hallways were dark, the only light coming from faint emergency panels that flickered with a dull glow. Jace moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The ship had clearly been abandoned, or worse, damaged beyond repair. As he moved deeper into the vessel, he stumbled upon the body of what appeared to be an alien being, slumped against the wall. The creature was humanoid, tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like silver. Its features were delicate, almost ethereal, and its glowing eyes stared blankly ahead, lifeless. Jace's heart skipped a beat. Was this the one who had sent the distress call? Was there any hope of saving them? His training kicked in. He knelt beside the alien, checking for signs of life. There was no visible injury, but the creature was breathing shallowly. Jace's mind raced. He had no idea what kind of being this was, but he couldn't just leave them here to die alone. He carefully lifted the alien, cradling them in his arms. The weight of their fragile body felt surprisingly familiar, like carrying a piece of his own broken past. He brought them aboard his ship and laid them gently on the repair table. As he worked to stabilize their condition, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer alone in the universe, that somehow this creature's survival was tied to his own. For the first time in a long while, Jace felt a flicker of something deep inside, a need to fix, to help. It was a feeling he thought had died with the war, but now, here in the depths of space, it was stirring once more. And so, as the alien's fragile form lay before him, Jace knew one thing for certain. This was no coincidence. He had been drawn here for a reason. The universe, in all its vastness, had brought them together. And somehow, together, they would find a way to heal, not just the ship, but themselves. Jace didn't know how much time had passed since he had brought the alien aboard his ship. Hours? Days? He was too focused on keeping her alive to notice. Her breathing had stabilized, and the slight shimmer in her skin had become more pronounced as she slowly recovered. But there was something else that intrigued him, something he couldn't quite explain. It was as if her presence alone filled the empty spaces of his mind, giving him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He watched her closely, trying to make sense of the strange being lying on his ship's repair table. Her skin, a smooth silver, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of his ship. The shape of her body was similar to humans, tall, slender, but her features were distinctly alien. Her face had high, sharp cheekbones and delicate, almost translucent skin. Her eyes, when they opened, were large and gleaming, with a depth that made Jace's heart skip a beat. It was hard to believe that someone like her could be lost, stranded, and so vulnerable. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, and Jace couldn't help but be mesmerized by the calmness she exuded, even in her unconscious state. After what felt like an eternity, she finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and Jace instinctively took a step back. He wasn't sure what to expect, whether she would attack or be confused. Instead, her gaze locked onto him, steady and calm. There was no fear, no hostility in her eyes, just quiet understanding, as if she had been waiting for him all along. "Who are you?" Jace whispered, almost to himself. The words were out before he even realized it. It was a strange question to ask someone so clearly not from Earth, but he couldn't help it. He had no idea what to make of her, or what had brought her here. The alien didn't speak immediately. Instead, she raised her hand, slowly, as if testing her own strength. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear, filled with an alien cadence Jace couldn't fully understand. "I am Lyra," she said, her words unfamiliar, yet somehow understandable in Jace's mind. She paused, her eyes scanning him carefully. "I am of the Noxian people." Jace frowned. The name Noxian didn't ring any bells. He had heard of many alien races over the years, but none by that name. Still, he didn't interrupt her. Instead, he gestured to her ship's wreckage, now docked beside his own. "Your ship, it's in pieces. I found you, drifting out there in space." He hesitated, unsure of how much to say. "What happened?" Lyra's eyes seemed to flicker with a sadness he couldn't explain. She took a deep breath, a gesture that seemed strange, as if she wasn't quite used to it. Her hands curled slightly as if searching for strength in the silence between them. "We were attacked," she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her words. "The fleet, my people's fleet. It was ambushed by an enemy we had been avoiding for years. They came from beyond the stars, ruthless, with no care for life. They destroyed everything we had, everything we were." Jace felt his chest tighten. He knew that kind of loss, even if the details were different. He had seen too much of it himself, in the war. The enemy she spoke of, he didn't know who they were, but he understood the feeling of losing everything in an instant. Lyra continued, her gaze distant, as if reliving the events. "My ship was one of the few to escape the battle, but my systems were damaged, and I was unable to avoid the debris fields. I had no choice but to send a distress signal before everything failed. Jace nodded silently. He understood the feeling of being trapped, helpless in the face of overwhelming destruction. It was something he had felt during the war, when his own comrades had fallen. He could feel the weight of her loss, and it was a pain that mirrored his own. But there was something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It wasn't just the sadness or the devastation. There was a quiet strength in her, an energy that seemed to pulse beneath the surface, like a spark ready to ignite. "What happened to your people?" Jace asked, his voice soft. Lyra's eyes darkened, and for the first time, she looked away, as if ashamed of what had happened. I am one of the last of my kind. The Noxians once ruled the stars, but we were too proud, too powerful. We thought we were invincible. We thought we could conquer anything, that no enemy could defeat us. But we were wrong." She paused, a bitter smile forming on her lips. "The very thing that made us great, our advanced technology, was also our downfall. We built weapons beyond our control. And now we pay the price." Jace didn't know what to say. He could hear the regret in her voice, the weight of centuries of mistakes. It wasn't so different from his own people's past, though the details were different. Earth had made its own errors during the war, and Jace had lost so much because of it. But in that moment, as he looked at Lyra, he saw not just a broken alien, but a soul that had suffered much like his own. And for the first time in years, Jace realized he wasn't alone in this vast, cold universe. "Don't give up," Jace said quietly, almost without thinking. "You've survived this long. You're not alone anymore. I'll help you." Lyra's gaze met his once more, and for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was small, fragile, but it was there. "Thank you," she whispered, the words strange but sincere. "I won't give up." And with that, Jace made a silent promise to himself and to Lyra. He wouldn't let her fall, not while he was still breathing. The days after Lyra woke were filled with a new sense of purpose. Jace found himself working longer hours than ever before, determined to fix the Noxian ship. The damage was far beyond anything he had ever seen. Entire sections of the hull had been ripped apart. The engines were barely functioning, and the power core was dangerously unstable. But Jace was no stranger to repair work. He had spent years fixing ships, even when they seemed beyond saving. This, however, felt different. As he worked, Lyra stayed by his side. At first, she had been too weak to help much, but over time, she regained her strength. She watched him with a quiet curiosity, studying every movement he made, though her words remained few. Jace didn't mind. He preferred the silence, the steady hum of the ship's systems, and the sound of tools in his hands. The Noxian ship, once beautiful and sleek, now looked like a war-torn relic, but Jace could see the potential beneath the damage. He had repaired starships after battles, after storms, after years of neglect, but this was something new. There was something extraordinary about Lyra's ship, something he couldn't quite explain. The technology was like nothing he had ever encountered, far beyond human understanding. One evening, as Jace worked on the engine's main conduit, Lyra approached him. She had been studying the ship's control panel, her long fingers tracing the strange symbols on the surface. Jace glanced up at her, wiping sweat from his brow. "You understand this?" he asked, surprised. The symbols on the console seemed almost alive, shifting when looked at from different angles, and Jace had been unable to make heads or tails of them. Lyra nodded slowly, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "I do," she said, her voice calm. "This is part of the Noxian navigation system. It was designed to be intuitive, to connect with the mind of the pilot. But it's damaged. The link between me and the ship is broken." Jace studied her for a moment. "Broken." She nodded again, her expression unreadable. "Yes, a part of me must be connected to the ship for it to function properly. Without that connection, the ship cannot reach its full potential." Jace thought about what she said. He had seen advanced technology before, But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He wasn't sure how to fix the ship's connection to her, but he knew he had to try. "I'll figure it out," Jace said, determination in his voice. "We'll get it working again. You just focus on getting better." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jace saw a flicker of gratitude in them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I did not expect. I did not think anyone would help me." Jace shrugged, not sure how to respond. "We're not so different. You've been through a lot. I've been through a lot. Maybe this is just the universe's way of bringing us together." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe you are right," she said at last. "I was lost, and I feared I would never find my way again. But perhaps you are my way." Jace felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He didn't know what he was expecting when he first found her, but it certainly wasn't this feeling of connection, of purpose. It wasn't just about fixing a ship anymore. It was about something bigger, something unspoken. As the days went on, the repairs continued. Jace worked tirelessly, fixing the ship's engines, repairing the communication system, and patching up holes in the hull. He even managed to get the life support systems working again. But the most difficult part was still ahead, reconnecting Lyra with the ship's core systems. Jace knew it would be the key to making the ship fly again. But Lyra didn't seem to mind the wait. She spent her time teaching him what she could about the Noxian people, about their advanced technologies, their culture, and their history. Slowly, Jace began to understand more about the alien race that had once ruled the stars. Lyra spoke of her people's pride, their ambition, and their downfall. It was a story of greatness, but also of hubris. The Noxians had reached the peak of their power, only to fall victim to their own arrogance. Through her stories, Jace could see the similarities to his own world. Earth had its wars, its mistakes, its own struggles with power. He wondered if that was the fate of all civilizations, that they were doomed to fall when they became too confident, too powerful. He didn't know the answer, but he knew one thing for sure. The Noxians had a lot to teach him. And if he could help Lyra, if he could help her rebuild, maybe there was hope for his own soul too. One evening, as they worked side by side, Lyra spoke again. "You are unlike anyone I have met before, Jace," she said softly. "You remind me of my people, before the fall. You have a fire inside you, a desire to rebuild, to create. I see it in your hands, in your eyes. It is rare to find someone with such strength of spirit." Jace looked up, surprised by her words. "I don't feel strong," he admitted, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I've lost so much. I don't know if I can ever really fix what's been broken." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "You are fixing something, Jace," she said, her voice steady. "You are fixing yourself, and in doing so, you are helping me." Jace didn't know how to respond, but he felt a strange warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The ship wasn't the only thing that was being repaired. Something inside him was healing too. And with each passing day, as the ship came closer to being whole again, Jace realized that he wasn't just helping Lyra fix her starship. He was helping her fix something else. The broken pieces of her past, her people, and maybe even his own. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would find their way. The days on the ship had become a routine. Jace worked tirelessly on the Noxian vessel, and Lyra, now fully recovered, was by his side more often than not. Together, they had made incredible progress. The outer hull was almost completely repaired, and the power core was stable once again. But there was one final challenge ahead. The ship's core systems, the heart of the vessel, remained unresponsive. Jace knew it was time to attempt the final step. The energy running through the Noxian ship was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It pulsed with an ancient, almost mystical energy that connected directly to Lyra's mind. The ship seemed alive, as if it shared a bond with her. A bond that had been severed when the ship was damaged in the ambush. "I think this is it," Jace said as he stared at the main console. The symbols that had once been so foreign to him were now somewhat familiar. He had spent hours studying them with Lyra's guidance, learning how they related to the ship's systems. Lyra stood beside him, her silver eyes scanning the display. "This is where I connect," she said quietly. "The link must be reestablished. I can feel the ship, but it is distant. If we are to reach full power, I need to reconnect with the core." Jace nodded, taking a deep breath. "Okay, let's do it." They had spent the past few days preparing, but now the time had come. The air between them was thick with anticipation. Lyra approached the central console and placed her hands gently on the smooth surface. She closed her eyes, as though trying to find some inner calm, and then slowly, almost reverently, began to chant softly in her own language. Jace had heard the language before, though he didn't understand it. There was something almost hypnotic in the way she spoke, like the words were part of the ship itself, part of the very fabric of the universe. He could feel the energy around them shift, the ship humming faintly, as though waking from a long sleep. Lyra's body tensed, her brow furrowing as she focused harder on the task at hand. "It's difficult," she muttered, her voice strained. "The bond is broken, and the ship resists." Jace didn't know what to say. He had never seen someone struggle with technology in this way. The idea of a ship having a bond with its pilot was something he could barely comprehend, but he could see it in Lyra's eyes, the deep connection she had with this vessel. The ship was more than just metal and circuits to her. It was part of her, and she was part of it. He stepped closer, unsure of how to help. "What can I do?" he asked softly. Lyra opened her eyes, her gaze distant. "Help me connect," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I need you to stabilize the core." Jace blinked. "Stabilize it? How?" Lyra nodded toward a control panel nearby. "The core has fluctuating energy. If you can adjust the energy flow, it will give me the strength to link properly." Jace took a deep breath and moved to the panel, his hands moving quickly as he adjusted the dials. He could feel the hum of the ship intensify as he worked, the power building up in the core. The ship seemed to pulse with life, the energy growing stronger and stronger as he made the necessary adjustments. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the pressure mounted. He was getting closer, but it was delicate work. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. He glanced over at Lyra. She was still focused, her hands trembling slightly as she continued to chant softly, her connection with the ship growing stronger with each passing moment. "Almost there," Jace muttered to himself as he made the final adjustments to the energy flow. The ship's hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath him. Suddenly, there was a loud, sharp sound, a crack in the air that seemed to split the silence. Jace's heart skipped a beat. Had he made a mistake? But then, something remarkable happened. The lights on the ship flickered and then stabilized. The core came to life, glowing with a radiant energy that filled the room. It was as if the ship had awakened, its power flowing through the entire vessel. The faint shimmer in Lyra's skin grew brighter, her eyes opening wide with awe. "It's working," she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "I can feel it. I am connected again." Jace stood there, stunned. The ship, once silent and lifeless, was now pulsing with energy. It was alive, and so was Lyra. The connection between them had been restored. The ship's systems hummed with power, its heart beating once more. Lyra looked at Jace, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "You helped me. You brought us back together." Jace smiled, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. He had done it. They had done it. "Together," he said softly, nodding toward the now fully operational ship. For a long moment, they stood in silence, listening to the ship's hum as it vibrated around them. It was a moment of peace, a rare feeling for both of them. Jace had helped fix something that seemed beyond repair, and in the process, he had fixed something inside himself as well. But their journey was far from over. They had a long way to go, and more challenges awaited them in the stars. But for the first time in a long time, Jace felt ready to face whatever came next. They had rebuilt the ship, and in doing so, they had rebuilt a part of themselves. The stars outside the ship were no longer just cold, distant points of light. They were the beginning of a new adventure, a new chapter in both of their lives. With the Noxian ship fully repaired and its systems restored, Jace and Lyra stood before the control panel, the weight of their shared accomplishment filling the air. The ship now felt like a living, breathing entity, and the bond between Lyra and the vessel had been fully restored. The hum of the engines reverberated through the hull, a sign that it was ready to fly once more. Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes reflecting the light of the stars beyond. Her expression was a mix of awe and quiet determination. "It is time," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We can leave now. I can return to the stars." Jace nodded, feeling a rush of excitement and uncertainty. He had helped her rebuild, but he knew that their journey wasn't over. They had faced obstacles together, and now, as the ship's engines roared to life, they were ready to face the unknown. The Noxian ship slowly lifted off from the docking bay, the force of its engines pressing them back into their seats. Jace felt the ship's power beneath him, the smoothness of the controls, and the way it responded to Lyra's gentle touch. It was as if the ship was an extension of her, and as it rose into the vast emptiness of space, Jace couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. As the stars stretched out before them, Lyra guided the ship effortlessly. She moved with confidence, her hands deftly adjusting the controls as if she had been born to navigate the stars. Jace watched her, fascinated by the way she connected with the ship, the way she became one with it. He had never seen anything like it. "I can feel the stars," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder. "It is different now. I am not alone. The ship and I, we are one. And you, Jace, you have made this possible." Jace smiled at her words, feeling the sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. But as the ship moved farther into the depths of space, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something much larger than they both realized. "Where are we going?" Jace asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Lyra's eyes darkened slightly, the light of the stars reflecting in them. "I must return to my people," she said quietly. "The Noxians are scattered across the galaxy. Many of them are still fighting, still trying to survive. I must find them, help them rebuild what was lost." Jace nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had lost people too, people who had once been close to him. He knew what it felt like to want to rebuild, to find a way to move forward after everything had fallen apart. "How will you find them?" he asked. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her fingers brushing over the ship's console as if seeking answers. "There is a place, a hidden world, where the Noxians gathered before the war. It was a sanctuary, a place of peace. If I can find it, I can regroup with those who remain, and together, we can rebuild our civilization." Jace felt a chill run down his spine. A hidden world. That sounded dangerous, mysterious, and perhaps even impossible. But there was something in Lyra's voice, an unshakable determination, that made him believe she could do it. "Do you know where it is?" Jace asked, his voice steady. Lyra's gaze shifted to the stars outside, and for a moment she was silent. "I once knew," she said, her voice distant, "but that was a lifetime ago. The war has changed everything. The world is lost to time, hidden from those who seek it. I will have to rely on the ship's systems, on the old maps, to guide me." Jace could see the uncertainty in her eyes, but he also saw the fire that burned within her. It was the same fire that had kept her going through everything she had faced. It was the fire that had driven her to rebuild the ship, to reconnect with her people. And Jace realized, for the first time, that he was no longer just helping her. He was part of her mission now. Whatever came next, he would face it with her. "We'll find it," Jace said, his voice full of resolve. "We'll find your people, and we'll help them rebuild. Together." Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes softening. "You do not have to help me," she said, her voice gentle. "You could return to your own world. There is no need for you to get involved in this fight." Jace shook his head. "I don't have a world to go back to," he said quietly. "My past is gone. But this feels like something worth fighting for. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you." Lyra regarded him for a long moment, and then a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You are braver than you think, Jace. Perhaps we are not so different after all." The ship continued to sail through the stars, the vast expanse of space stretching out before them. There was uncertainty ahead, but there was also hope, a hope that had not existed for either of them in a long time. Together, they would search for the lost world of the Noxians, for the last remnants of a civilization that had once been great. And as they sailed deeper into the unknown, they both realized that they were not just searching for a lost world. They were searching for something much more important, a future, a place where they could rebuild and perhaps find a new home among the stars. The ship drifted silently through the vastness of space, its engines humming softly as they powered onward. Lyra's focus was unwavering, her hands moving gracefully across the controls as the stars stretched endlessly before them. She was navigating a course that only she could understand, guided by the ancient maps and data stored within the ship's systems. Jace, seated beside her, watched in quiet awe. He had never seen someone so attuned to their surroundings, so connected to the ship. It was as though the stars themselves were her allies. "Are we close?" Jace asked, his voice breaking the stillness. Lyra's silver eyes flickered to him for a moment, then returned to the glowing map before them. "I do not know," she replied softly. "The world I seek is hidden, and the maps are incomplete. It has been lost for many centuries." Jace felt a chill run through him as the weight of her words settled in. A lost world, hidden from the galaxy. He could only imagine how many civilizations had tried to find it and failed, but he could see it in her eyes. The determination, the hope. She had not come this far to turn back now. "You've been searching for this place your whole life, haven't you?" Jace asked, more to himself than to her. Lyra's fingers paused on the controls, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. "I was not always searching," she said, her voice quiet. "When I was young, the Noxians were still strong, still united. We did not need to hide. But the war, the fall of our people, it changed everything." Jace could hear the pain in her voice, the weight of loss that still clung to her. He didn't know the full story of the Noxians, but he understood the feeling of losing everything, of having a world, a people, a future ripped away. He knew what it was like to feel like there was nothing left but the void. "I'm sorry," Jace said softly, not knowing how else to respond. Lyra shook her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "There is no need for apologies. The past cannot be changed. We can only move forward." And so they did. The ship continued its journey, and though the silence between them was often heavy, it was also comforting. There was an unspoken bond between them now, a shared purpose. They weren't just traveling together. They were on a mission. They were both searching for something lost, and perhaps in the process, they would find what they had been searching for all along. Days turned into weeks as they navigated through star systems, scanning distant planets, hoping to find a trace of the hidden world. Every lead turned out to be a dead end. Every signal turned out to be a false hope. But still, Lyra didn't waver. She worked tirelessly, her eyes never straying from the controls, her mind focused entirely on the task ahead. Jace, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel the growing sense of unease. The stars were beautiful, yes, but they were also vast, empty, and silent. He had spent most of his life on Earth, surrounded by people, by noise, by life. Here, in the emptiness of space, it felt as though they were the last two souls in the universe. One evening, as the ship drifted past an asteroid field, Jace found himself staring out of the viewport, his thoughts swirling. He had never been one to believe in fate, but something about this journey, something about Lyra, felt destined. They were connected in a way he couldn't explain, and though he had no idea what lay ahead, he knew he couldn't abandon her now. He wouldn't. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. Jace. He turned to see her standing beside him, her eyes fixed on the control panel. What is it? I think I found something, she said, her voice full of quiet excitement. Jace's heart skipped a beat. A lead. Lyra nodded, her fingers flying over the console as she input commands. It's faint, but I'm certain. It's a signal, one that matches the coordinates of the hidden world. Jace's pulse quickened. This could be it. They had searched for so long, and now, after all the dead ends, they were finally on the right path. Are you sure? He asked, unable to hide the hope in his voice. Lyra's eyes met his, filled with the same mixture of hope and uncertainty. I cannot be certain, but the signal is unlike anything I've encountered. It could be the world we've been searching for. The ship changed course, its engines powering up as Lyra adjusted their trajectory. They were heading toward an unknown destination, the coordinates set in motion by the faint signal they had picked up. The journey had brought them to this point, and now, for the first time in what felt like forever, they were moving towards something real. As the ship powered forward, Jace stood beside Lyra, watching the stars blur into streaks of light as they gained speed. There was still so much uncertainty ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Jace felt a spark of hope. The hidden world was out there, and they were getting closer. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Lyra and her people, but for him as well. After everything he had lost, maybe this journey would lead him to something more than just the stars. Perhaps it would lead him to a future that he and Lyra would build together. The Noxian ship soared through space, faster now, as they followed the faint signal Lyra had discovered. The stars outside the ship streaked by in a blur, the deep, endless void stretching out ahead of them. The journey had been long, filled with moments of uncertainty, but now, with the coordinates set and the signal growing stronger, they were closer than ever to the hidden world Lyra had longed to find. Jace stood next to Lyra at the controls, his hands resting on the edge of the console. He could feel the tension in the air, the silent anticipation that hung between them. For weeks now, they had been on this mission together, but this moment felt different. The weight of what they were about to uncover was heavy, and both of them knew that whatever they found could change everything. Lyra's silver eyes were fixed on the screen, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls as she adjusted their path. She was calm, focused, but Jace could sense the nervous energy beneath her composed exterior. He understood it. After all these years, the lost world, her people, it was all within reach. Do you think we're really going to find it? Jace asked, his voice breaking the quiet hum of the ship. Lyra didn't look at him, but her voice was steady. I have to believe we will. It's all I have left. Jace nodded, knowing that her words held more meaning than he could understand. For her, this wasn't just about finding a place. It was about finding a piece of herself, a way to reconnect with her past, a way to heal the deep wounds that had been left by the fall of her civilization. Suddenly, the ship's systems beeped, signaling an approaching object. Lyra's hands moved quickly, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted their course. We're close, she said, her voice almost a whisper. The signal is coming from ahead. Jace's heart raced. He leaned closer to the viewport, staring into the endless black of space. In the distance, a shadow began to take shape, a faint outline against the backdrop of stars. As they drew closer, it became clearer. A planet, small and hidden, nestled in a quiet corner of the galaxy. The signal was coming from there. There it is, Lyra said, her voice full of awe. The hidden world. The planet was unlike any Jace had ever seen. It was covered in vast oceans, dotted with green landmasses that glowed with an otherworldly light. The atmosphere shimmered with a soft, iridescent glow, as if the planet itself was alive, breathing in the vastness of space. It was beautiful, peaceful, and ancient. Lyra's fingers danced across the console as she brought the ship closer, carefully navigating through the planet's atmosphere. Jace could feel the ship's systems adjusting, responding to Lyra's every command. The connection between them, between her and the ship, was undeniable now. They were a team, working in perfect harmony. As they descended toward the surface, Jace's thoughts raced. What would they find on this hidden world? Was it truly a sanctuary for the Noxians, or had time and war taken their toll, leaving only ruins behind? The ship's descent slowed, and they glided smoothly over the planet's surface, searching for a landing site. The land below was peaceful, untouched by the chaos that had consumed so much of the galaxy. There were no signs of life yet, but the quiet beauty of the landscape was enough to make Jace's heart ache. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "There," she said, pointing to a clearing ahead. "That is where we will land." Jace watched as Lyra expertly piloted the ship down into the clearing. The soft hum of the engines filled the air as the ship touched down gently on the lush ground. The landing gear settled with a quiet thud, and the ship came to a stop. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Lyra took a deep breath, her fingers lingering on the controls as she prepared to exit the ship. "We've made it," she said softly. "This is where it all begins." Jace stood beside her, feeling a sense of awe wash over him. They had made it. After all the searching, all the uncertainty, they were finally standing on the doorstep of something new, something that could restore not only Lyra's people but also her hope. The air outside the ship was cool and fresh, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere of the ship. Jace stepped out first, followed by Lyra. The landscape before them was breathtaking. Rolling hills covered in thick forests, shimmering lakes reflecting the light of distant stars, and in the distance, the outline of ancient structures that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "This place," Jace began, his voice filled with wonder. "It's beautiful." Lyra's eyes glistened as she took in the sight of the land she had thought lost forever. "It is," she said softly. "But it is not just beauty we need to find. We need to reconnect with the past, with those who remain." Jace nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They had found the world, but the real challenge lay ahead. Rebuilding, reuniting the Noxians, and healing the scars of war. There was much to be done, and they had just begun. Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes meeting his with a sense of quiet determination. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jace looked out at the vast landscape, the world that lay before them, and then back at Lyra. "I've been ready for a long time," he said. Together, they stepped forward, into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The stars above them had led them here, but now it was up to them to shape the future. And for the first time in a long time, Jace felt a sense of purpose, one that stretched far beyond the vast emptiness of space. They had found the hidden world, and with it, a chance for a new beginning.